Over the last 20 years, I've had the opportunity to teach in almost 40 countries, and I've worked with more than 100 different translators. And I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've also learned a lot. And I know that these folks who serve and volunteer with us are essential to what we do, and we ought to do whatever we can to make this experience a good one for everyone involved. Here are some important things to consider when you're working with a translator. 1, talk with them in advance. Get to know them a little bit. Develop some rapport. Ask about their family and share about yours. Ask about other settings where they've translated. This gives you a chance to hear their English, and they can get a feel for your speaking pattern. They'll probably want to know what kind of English you speak. Is it British or textbook, or is it regional or just simple English? Remember that our different dialects can be very difficult to understand clearly. There are people from different parts of the U.S. that I have a hard time understanding. 2, get them a written copy of your notes in advance, as well as a copy of any translated notes or handouts. Then walk through the notes briefly together to see if there's something that needs to be clarified before you even begin. 3, share some of the illustrations or analogies that you might use. When I share about my family in teaching settings, I need to talk in advance with my translator about some unique aspects of our family, like adoption or disabilities, cerebral palsy, adaptations. These can be tricky to explain and harder to translate. 4, think about theological terms or Christian lingo that might be a problem to translate, and decide in advance with the translator how they will be explained. 5, watch out for illustrations or examples that may not apply in this culture, like baseball or insurance, thermostats, appliances, bills. You might need to modify them to something more common to the participants. 6, discover if your translator prefers to hear an entire sentence or phrase by phrase. It's going to depend a lot on their experience and their preference. So you're going to find out if they're going to do simultaneous or echo translation. Simultaneous means they'll be translating at the same time you're talking. These folks are very skilled at what they do. Or the echo translation will be spoken after you finish a thought or a sentence, they're going to say it. 7, in either case, be sure to give a complete thought before you break for translation. Remember that not all languages have the same word order or sentence structure as English. 8, find out if your translator will interpret the ideas more than translate the words. Usually, the more experience they have in the topic area, the more comfortable they're going to be at enhancing the translation. So decide how much you trust this kind of process or how much confidence you have in them. And then you can talk together about how to handle your mistakes when you misspeak. Do you want them to correct your mistakes automatically or stop and let you know so you can decide in that moment? 9, let them know that you will keep your eye contact with the audience and the individual, and you're not going to be looking at the translator. See, your goal during your presentation is to connect with the participants. 10, decide in advance how you're going to handle questions and answers from the audience. It's often more difficult for the translator to translate back to English for you. So they might be comfortable translating, or you might want to arrange for another translator to do that part of the translating. Again, try to keep your eye contact with the individual and not with the translator. 11, if you need to have ideas or responses recorded on the board, choose someone from the audience to write rather than add that responsibility to the translator. It's just too distracting for them to do both. 12, If you're teaching long hours, try to arrange for more than one translator. And remember to give them a break during meals and break times. Let someone different translate during these interactions with others. 13. Consider having main points or keywords translated in advance onto the board or onto cardstock. I like to use symbols or photos or line drawings that are universally understood, so there's not a need to translate them. 14. Use very simple words as you speak. Usually when I'm teaching, the translator is very happy that they can understand everything that I'm saying. It's intentional. I focus on speaking slower and clearer and use simpler English. 15. Articulate well. Avoid slang. It's too hard to translate. Yo, what's up, dude? Watch out for expressions and idioms that don't translate well word for word, like it's a 9-to-5 job, or I'll get right on it, or like a deer in the headlights. 16. Try to choose words that only have one clear meaning. Things like, it was a lazy day, or that was a rough experience. They can have multiple meanings. 17. Make sure the translator has a microphone, or at least the better microphone. It's more important that the audience hears well in their own language. 18. If you say a sentence or a phrase that the translator doesn't understand well, and they ask you to repeat it, there's probably a word or phrase that they're not familiar with. So instead of just saying the exact sentence again, rephrase it and try to simplify the thought. 19. Invite the translator to do more than just say the words, but to follow your example. They should be encouraged to match your volume, your facial expressions, your hand motions, and every movement you make. The best translators I've had, almost always, they stayed shoulder to shoulder with me, and they did everything exactly like I did. Number 20. Turn up the volume on everything you do. You're communicating not just with your words, which they can't understand much of, but with your voice, the tone and variety of it, your facial expressions and movements. Be animated. Give it some life. Number 21. Warn the translator in advance when you intend to misspeak on purpose as a teaching tool, so they won't automatically correct you. 22. If you're going to do a demonstration or have a surprise element, explain it to them in advance so it doesn't catch them off guard. It's good for them to know the point of the illustration so they can make sure that's what the audience understands. And 23. Clarify in advance when the participants are raising their hand to respond to a question that you will call on the participants and not them. That way, there's no confusion and you maintain your leadership. 24. Avoid situations, if at all possible, where the translator is also the event organizer or the lead person. They can become distracted by other program details or responsibilities, or even feel like they need to correct the participants. The audience will be confused about who's really saying these difficult things, you or the translator. You know, God's Word has a number of examples where someone was translating, and we see the importance of this relationship. Like God gave Aaron to Moses so that he could speak out to Pharaoh for him. God told the prophets that they were to boldly speak out whatever words he said to them. Paul reminds us that we are ambassadors for Christ and that he is making his appeal to the world through us. When you think about it, God says, how can they hear unless someone speaks to them? And our audience is the same. How can they understand us unless the translator speaks to them in a language they can understand? Translators make it possible for us to speak and to share the good news. So take good care of them. Thank them personally, privately, and publicly. Honor them in front of the participants. Remember to bring them a gift and bless them for their important contribution to the ministry. I hope these tips will help you have a better experience with translators and allow you to focus fully on the ministry that you came to do.